All right, everyone. Welcome to this Saturday morning discussion, question and answers on misophonia. I'm Tom Dozier. I'm the president of Misophonia Institute. I have been studying misophonia since it was introduced to me in 2012. It's actually the last day of August of 2012, August 31st. By a mom who had this daughter who had this incurable hearing disorder that was going to ruin her life, but she had auditory, visual, and odor, olfactory triggers that she reacted the same way to. So, well, that can't be a hearing defect neurologically. That has to be some form of a reflex operation. And as a behavior scientist, I thought surely we have research on reflexes and respondent behavior, we would call it. Let's see what we can apply. And so I've just been for the last 12 years working on this condition. Anyway, I'm glad to meet with everyone. I just made a trigger. I apologize. That's a normal sound people make, but I just realized that I made a trigger sound, and I apologize for that. I'm not doing it intentionally, I promise you. So let's go ahead and see if anybody has a question to start with. And if not, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about misophonia being a learned condition. So anybody have a question or a comment that you want to kick us off on? If not, we'll talk about misophonia being a learned or an acquired condition. Lyle, you have your hand up, Lyle.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my mic on.
Okay.
Just about everybody I talk to with misophonia, myself included, it kind of has this story where they talk about getting yelled at the dinner table. So I would really react when my parents would yell at me because of school, or when it was usually about school, where my whole body would tense. And you talk about muscle reaction. So my whole body was doing it. Now it's kind of just one muscle. I think it's my tensor tympani because I get a sharp pain in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
I've always described it as that, and of course, people said, "Well, that can't, sound can't possibly hurt your ears."
Oh, yes, it
But
can. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. But is that pretty much what you found, that the kind of like negative experiences like that around the dinner table where there's constant noises?
That's a very common thing, Lyle. In fact, 96% of people with misophonia and several studies have shown that they have eating triggers. So mouth smacking, eating sounds is by far the most common. And what you described, Lyle, was a situation where you heard something and you tensed up. Now, you heard yelling at you, but you were also hearing eating sounds at the same time. So you heard they yelled at you and you're now all riled up, right? And then you notice that they smacked their lips or they chewed with their mouth open. And you go, oh, they chewed with their mouth open, and your muscles tense, right? So there's a sound, an eating sound at the table, and your muscles are tensing. Eating sound, muscles tensing, eating sound, muscles tensing. And the way Pavlovian conditioning works, classical conditioning, is that the brain notices a sound and then it watches for about 2 seconds what's happening in the body. Sound, what's happening in the body. And if it's sound, muscles are tensing, sound, shoulders are tensing, arms are tensing, whatever, sound, muscles are tensing, then the brain says, I see a pattern. This is the brain stem, the autonomic nervous system, which I call your lizard brain. It sees a pattern and says, Lyle, I can do that for you. I will help you. And so now it's that smack sound, and then you get the muscles tense. And that's being the same as being tasered. That's like, pow, it's zapping you. In fact, here's my little, I'll see if I can pull this up real quick. This is one of my graphics I use when I work with people. Let me show this. I hit the share button. There we go. So I talk about a research study that we conducted where people were hearing or were experiencing different locations of a physical sensation when they heard a trigger. Now, Lyle, you were saying it's in your ear, that tensor tympani muscle. But when your muscles tighten, it's like you're being tasered, you're being zapped. And it's that physical zap to the body that then triggers an emotional reflex reaction, which Dr. Sukhbinder Kumar did the first research on that emotional reflex, which connects the insula and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and it goes back and it hits the amygdala and hippocampus and explodes. So this is what we mean by learning. And anytime your brain is hearing a sound and noticing a physical action, sound, physical action, and it's about a 2-second cycle time there that it watches, it will pick up a muscle reflex. Okay. So Sean, go ahead and ask or comment.
Hey, Tom. I had a question for you, and I guess for anybody else that can add to it. But um, what technologies are people using to manage their misophonia? I'm sure everybody knows about noise canceling headphones, but what other apps or technologies are people using to help them, either to prevent a trigger or to help them calm themselves down? So any technology that can help with managing misophonia is my question.
Okay. Let's get some comments on that. If anyone here has something, let's talk first about the calming things. One of there are a number of meditation apps that some people like. Sean, I highly promote progressive muscle relaxation trainings to develop the ability to relax your muscles on demand. I don't know of a lot of apps for calming you down, because once your body you have all the hormones kicking through it, it's hard. It's hard to calm down. So I don't really know of any calm down apps, or techniques other than distraction, focusing intently on physical reactions. There's one little trick that works for about half the people, and that's saying a really strong thank you. And if a thank you triggers a warm, fuzzy response, it can halt that ugly misophonia, yucky response. I know a few people who really benefit from a big smile. So everybody give this a try. We're going to smile for 20 seconds. So the story goes, you can make yourself happier with a pencil. And then you smile so big that it doesn't touch. And what happens is, if you do this for 20 seconds, I'm timing it now, so try it. Big smile, your brainstem, your lizard brain is watching your face. And it's going, oh my goodness, Tom, you're happy. Wow, if you're happy, that means you need some endorphins and some dopamine and some serotonin. And that's 20 seconds. And so a big smile actually gives you a dose of feel good hormones. And just the opposite, a frown gives you a dose of feel bad hormones from your lizard brain. Andrea, how about a comment?
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I was just wondering, can these behaviors be learned as young as being an infant or a baby? Because my daughter had some surgical procedures done, and in the background there was lots of phones ringing and drills, and her mouth had to be manipulated. She's also on the autism spectrum, and she developed noise fears at a very, very young age as a baby, and we just thought she'd outgrow them, and she never did, and she's now 40 years old.
Wow. So the answer is Pavlovian conditioning is working before you're born. So they did a study with newborn babies where they would play mommy's voice and then pick up the baby. Play mommy's voice and pick up the baby. They're pairing those two together. And you know, mommy's voice, oh, sweetie, la, 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 we're gonna pick you up now. And then pick up the baby. And when you pick up a baby, it triggers a relaxation response. And so they did that 16 times, and then they waited for the kids to fuss. And when the baby would start doing their little fussing, they would play mommy's voice, and the baby would go and relax as if they had been picked up. So Pavlovian conditioning starts, you know, before you're born, working full bore when you're born. So if something was happening causing pain, stress, tightening of muscles, and she's hearing at the same time drills and machines and whatever, the way you know it would probably picked up there is that if the sound that she was hearing in the hospital was then a trigger sound at home, then yeah, it can be picked up. It can be picked up in the first day of life. So that's very unusual because usually misophonia sounds are, you know, are learned with some emotional, some thought that kind of goes with it to cause the physical motion. There's also, in terms of learning the sounds, the other thing that can happen is, Andrea, was your daughter, and feel free to just jump in and comment if on any of my pauses. But was your daughter also sensitive to the volume of sounds?
It's interesting because she loves loud rock music. A fire engine going by with the sirens don't bother her. A paper shredder doesn't bother her. But the small little ding ding when we fasten seatbelts, that could bother her. Phoning is the worst though.
So what I was going to ask about, the reason I'm asking is because some children that have sensory processing disorder or just a sensory over responsiveness can hear a loud sound and then have a physical reaction, loud sound, physical reaction, enough that the brain stem picks it up to that sound, and then they hear a sound that's not so loud, but that same sound, and they have a misophonia response. So people who have sensory processing disorder are more likely to develop misophonia. Wow, that's a genetic condition that ties into misophonia. But it doesn't sound like that was the case for your daughter. It sounded like she was hearing specific sounds in a stressful situation, stressful because somebody's going to stab her with a needle or whatever, and it's just the timing. I notice a particular sound, and something happens that caused me to tense a muscle. I notice that same sound, that same muscle, and you do that 3 or 5 times, and the brainstem picks up on it, and it starts doing it automatically. These also, go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. She has also described it in the past as when she doesn't even like talking about it, when, you know, about her noise issues, but she describes it as like an emotional feeling. I don't know, it's really held her back terribly, and we just desperately want to help her with this.
It is really tough because the most noticeable thing with misophonia is the emotions. The emotional response is the hallmark of misophonia, the anger, disgust, the rage, sadness, anxiety responses. This is what's most noticed in the misophonia experience. In fact, the muscle portion of this that I mentioned is actually not typically observed with people with misophonia. Let me show a little slide here. So I did this at a Misophonia convention, which, by the way, Misophonia convention is at the end of October in Dallas this coming year. It's a great event for people, especially for teenagers with misophonia, to connect, but also for individuals and family members support. But I show these two models. I hear the sound, I just have these intense negative emotions and distress, and I have to leave the room. Or I hear the sound, there's a zap to me somewhere in my body, and then I have the emotions. And when I asked 10 different people, half said A, half said B. After I showed them their initial physical reflex, 9 said, 1 said A and 9 said B. So it's the emotions, Andrea, that your daughter is talking about, which is the most noticeable component of misophonia. Okay?
But it can be managed because we've been trying with all kinds of different things in the past. I mean, I'm just learning about misophonia only within the last few weeks to months. And it's sounding more and more like this is the root of everything for her. And
Yeah.
we want to manage it. I told her you don't have to love the noises, but we have to manage your behavior around them.
Well, it's much easier if you can reduce the physical reflex so that you don't have to manage the crazy emotions. So this is a slide I use when helping people, working with people, that you have the trigger, you have some physical zap to your body, you have these intense negative emotions, distress, and then you're running out of the room, putting on headphones. If we could just stop this physical reflex, we break the chain and we're done. But you can't, because this is caused by normal human neurology, not some defect in your brain telling you these sounds are going to hurt you. It's caused by a normal process, the same process that caused the baby to relax to their mother's voice. So we can't just give a person a pill or cut it out of their brain, but we know how to bring down this physical reflex. And as the physical reflex comes down, then the emotions come down, the distress, everything. And then you don't have to manage this emotional explosion that you're having because you don't have, if you come from this to this, then it's much easier to manage the emotions because they're not as intense and negative.
Right.
So that's an example. Now I'll give you a case that we had with a child. This was a teenager with autism. He was in a special day class in high school, and there was one particular girl that he'd been with for years, right, in this same educational situation, who had this funny kind of hello lilty sound. I don't know exactly what it was, and that was a trigger for him. And so we got him doing something. They got him doing something fun. Okay, he was watching Thomas Tank Engine cartoons, and they started playing tiny little bitty bits of this girl's voice. Now, if you take if you experience a trigger in the normal world environment, it causes misophonia to become stronger and stronger and stronger. But if you experience a trigger while you're doing something fun and engaging, in his case, watching these cartoons, then the reflex starts to come down. So then they could use a little bit louder sound of her voice, and that decayed, and then they use a louder sound, and that decayed, and they use a louder sound, and that decayed. And at the end, they were playing a long, loud clip of her voice, and he was dancing around the room with the song on the cartoon. So bringing down this physical reflex is a way that can help a person without cognitively trying to decide, I'm going to reframe it in my mind, I'm going to, decide to not get mad, because the physical reflex happens 200 milliseconds after the sound begins. That's super fast. You can't even, if you're watching it, you won't even see the difference. And then maybe another 50 or 100 milliseconds, the emotions are exploding. So there is no space between the trigger sound and the emotions to try to decide to do something different. Not with misophonia. Andrea, do you have another comment? Your hand, is that still up?
I don't know how to take it down.
Oh, click on it again like you
Oh,
put
I'm
it up.
sorry. No, that was very simple.
It'll come
Thank
down.
you. No, I appreciate
Tom?
your time answering. Thank you.
Okay.
Tom,
Yes.
I don't know how to put my hand up.
Well, then
Harriet.
just speak up and I'll,
Oh,
you know,
okay. Thank
and
you.
we'll.
Well, hi. Shall I speak? Shall I speak?
Sure. Go ahead, Harriet.
Okay. Well, since following this misophonia Saturdays of yours, it's been fascinating, and I realized mine started when I was 6 in the back seat of the car, mom and dad in the front seat in the old days, and with my brother who was older, but he would whine, and I'm not saying they encouraged him to whine, but they didn't discourage it. He could whine about practically anything, and it didn't seem to faze them. But I could not say things. If I were in pain, I shouldn't say I had a stomach ache. Or I was kind of like the daughter in the old days, where the son he gets to speak up. And I realized my problem, and if this is a trigger alert, is with people's voices, if it's sing-songy or whiny. But the pencil in the mouth smile thing I find fascinating. But in the last few weeks, I've realized that what I do is I go mute when I'm hearing someone in my mind whining. And in other words, kind of going into a nowhere conversation with a vocal thing that probably they learned as kids and it worked for them. It got them kind of what they wanted. But with me, I'm slammed back into that car again, and I do want to explode. But what I have found is, if instead of going silent, and I think when I go silent, people can tell I'm uncomfortable, but they don't stop what they're doing. It's important for me to maybe say something like, my name's Harriet, and a lot of women kind of, let's talk it, women talk, older women talk, they'll pull up to me and go, Harriet. It's teasing, and it's disturbing as can be. But I found that if I don't try to stay silent and impassive, but I go, Dorothy, back at them, well, that works. And also, if they just say something and I just repeat what they said, and kind of like while I'm thinking about what you said, that it gets me off the hook, and I haven't forced myself to become mute, and I don't feel like I'm in the backseat of the car with my brother anymore. It's very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a form of mimicking, isn't it?
Yeah.
And mimicking is known to be a common misophonia characteristic, where a person hears somebody eating and then they smacking their lips and they make the same smacking sound. And there's two reasons that I've heard of people doing that. One, for the eating sounds, it's to show them how disgusting the eating sounds are, even though they're not disgusting to the other person, right?
And believe me, the other person is never listening if they're making noise, I find, but because I do it all the time.
The other thing is that when you make that sound, it's not a trigger. So for you to make the lilting sound is hearing a similar sound that's not a trigger. And that seems to then take away some of the anguish kind of halt that misophonia reaction. So Sean asked earlier about management techniques.
Yeah.
Mimicking is, in fact, something that brings down the distress in a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's not like being angry. It's fortunately, it's a little, it calms you down without picking a fight. Because now I've realized from watching these things that there's no justification for getting mad at another person from the noise they make. But rather than absorbing it, you can kind of bounce it back at them a little bit.
Yeah, whatever it takes to handle it. In fact, Harriet, you might even want to have a little card that says, a lilting voice triggers me. Could you speak in a monotone?
Believe me, I have said that. I don't say it to every person I run into, but if people are confused, then I will say, I've got misophonia. They say, what's that? I say certain voices I have a really hard time with. It's painful. And a lot of people are quite sympathetic. They go, oh,
Yeah. So
tough.
people sometimes have cards about chewing gum that they can
Yeah.
actually just hand to the person.
Yeah.
Because when you're being triggered, your IQ plummets horribly,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to come up with a coherent sentence sometimes, isn't it?
I used to act, and when you're on the stage, sometimes actors upstage the other person. Actually, they get further away from the audience, but the audience starts to look at them. And there are some tricks that you can do that just kind of move you away from being stuck in that traumatized moment that people aren't always aware of, but they just realize you're not going to be stuck doing things their way necessarily because you're so scared. Yeah.
Okay, so let me present a trick to everyone that you might try. And what this is to try to change the meaning or the context of the sound. So Harriet, you've been on stage. If you
Yeah.
were on stage and the character was supposed to speak that way, would that trigger you? Have you ever had an acting part
Yeah.
where the person was supposed to speak that way?
Oh, heck no, because it's intentional. I mean, they're not accidentally reminding me of when I was 6. There,
But
I know I'm gonna hear him say. In fact, I love theater as a result because you can there's much more of an ability to predict what's going to happen. It's intentional. It's not accidental.
okay, so what you're saying is that if it was done in the theater, it wouldn't trigger you, correct?
No. Yeah, absolutely not.
Okay, so
I-
you can imagine that lilty voice as a theater drama point or whatever. And if you can kind of put
Yeah.
the meaning of that, well, that's a theater clip.
Oh, if
That
someone really hollers in a theatrical way, I will holler back in recognition that they're just being theatrical. But I don't have to trick myself. You know what I mean? But it's a matter of using some judgment, really.
yes, but I'm talking about changing the context of that sound. Like one person I worked with had a teacher's voice that triggered her, and she started saying she talks funny. That's really a funny way to talk, not a
Yeah.
horrible way to talk. And
Yeah.
by calling it a funny way of talking, it wasn't the same triggering effect. And so
Yeah.
people can do this. I know it doesn't happen often, but I know of a person who heard the sound of eating sounds and he thought of walking on leaves,
Yeah.
crunchy, and he says, I love the sound of walking on leaves.
Yeah.
And so he started kind of saying, oh, that's like walking on leaves. And it can take the edge off of it. If you can change the meaning of it, right, the context of it, you can bring it down. So you just might try that, Harriet, with somebody lilts at you. Think of a stage line where somebody does that same lilting and go, oh, well, she's a little actress.
I tell myself, I don't know if you know what opera buffa is. It's Italian opera, but everyone's in enormously garish costumes, and they're behaving like idiots. And
Yes.
sometimes even if they're not heavy, they'll pad them like everybody. It's very absurd. But yeah, all I have to do is tell myself, we got a real opera buffa happening here, and I can kind of let it go. It's like you've critiqued it and you can like get away from it. Yeah.
Okay, so give that a try. And
Yeah.
people can do that. Anything, if you can change the meaning of the context thought, then it can come down. So thank you very much.
It gets you away from thinking, what is that person thinking about me? And it gets
There
your
you
own.
go.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. Loud, new question, comment.
Well, I had a comment. Well, and I'm sorry, kind of moved on. But we were talking about doing the sound back to the
Yes.
person who's triggering you.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse. I'm an RN, and I've worked in the psych field. I worked at Ancora State Hospital, if anybody's ever heard of it. But in any event, it's called echolalia. It's a psychiatric defense mechanism that I've literally seen people who would repeat every word you would say. That it was that severe in some people, but I think it's a common defense mechanism for this kind of thing. I guess that's all. I just wanted to add that.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Good information. Does anyone else have another question or comment at this time? So I've had some people ask about treatments. And so let me just talk about some different treatments for misophonia. So there are people who do a cognitive behavioral, dialectic behavioral therapy treatment for misophonia. Jolene Jaffe is a classic example of that, where they take misophonia kind of, let's see if I can do this, like an onion, and the core is the neurological reaction, and then you get judgment and frustration and and anger and such, and acting fight or flight, and trying to address it more calmly and not let it rip you away. So that's more, Andrea, what you were talking about, asking about trying to control your reaction to it. So that's one method of treatment, and there are a number of people that work with misophonia that way. And if you do, then want to work with a cognitive behavior therapist, CBT therapist, just find out that they've had people with success, that they're having success with that. There is another method of misophonia treatment that is a hypnotherapy treatment. It's called sequent repatterning hypnotherapy. And sequent repatterning hypnotherapy recognizes the same response chain, but they work on the emotional response and dropping the emotional response. And with sequent repatterning with a normal hypnotherapy treatment, they may say you're going to hear this eating sound and you're going to stay calm. What sequent repatterning hypnotherapy recognizes that you're going to experience that sound. It's going to actually bump your body, but then instead of having a rage response, you're going to have a calm, resourceful reflex. And this is done by telehealth. And there's a number of people, if you Google, if you search for sequent repatterning hypnotherapy, Chris Pearson is the one that developed it. Anyway, it'll show up. You'll find the website, and this yellow line is their kind of average treatment of 80 people that had this treatment process. So again, sequent repatterning hypnotherapy is a very good treatment. Now I'm going to run up to one that I provide, which is, where is it? Here. Relaxation and counterconditioning therapy. This is a treatment where I help people understand misophonia reflexes, including their initial physical reflex. And then at that point, we work on how to get rid of that initial physical reflex. This program will include relaxation training to develop the muscle control to relax your toes or your thighs or your neck. It also includes counterconditioning, which counterconditioning is not your typical exposure therapy. Counterconditioning, because typical exposure to triggers increases your misophonia severity of that trigger. But if you're in a very happy, positive, engaged state and you get a little bit of a trigger, it will die out. This counterconditioning may be such things as relaxing your muscles. That's one of the major things, because misophonia has these tense muscle reactions. And if you relax your muscles, then that will cause that Pavlovian reflex to decay. I worked with a young lady for a few sessions, and she had moderate severity misophonia in both school and at home. And then she wasn't really engaging in the treatment, so the family stopped having the sessions with me. About a year later, Dad wanted to set up a session because misophonia was so horrible. I talked with, we met, and he was explaining how the girl was controlling the whole family and all the chaos in the home, and how horrible it was. And I looked at her previous year assessment, and it was about the same at school and at home. And I said, well, how's your misophonia at school? And she says, oh, it's not a problem at school. I'm not triggered at school. And I said, really? What did you do? Relax? She said, well, what else could I do? So she relaxed around trigger situations at school, and her misophonia died out. She fought with them at home, and her misophonia got worse. So there's ways of having, decaying and extinguishing these reflexes through counterconditioning, good management, ongoing support, and some other tricks. And so let's see, here's a research study page that I published on a case study. This person had a jaw reflex, and she had extremely severe misophonia. She was like maxed out on the general questionnaire, the misophonia assessment questionnaire, and on how much it was impacting her life. She was, 40 out of 50, a score on that. It was a huge impact. She was spending mostly all of her life in isolation, either staying in a base. She had quit her job and moved into a bedroom in her parents' basement, and was spending 95% of her time in isolation. And so we found that she had this jaw reflex, and we started working on it directly, and it came down very quickly. That's not as common as something like this, where it comes down fairly steadily over a 6 or 7 month period. So that's the treatment that I provide for relaxation and counterconditioning therapy. And that same treatment can be provided by a few psychologists, and it's going to be trialed at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, which is north of Dallas-Fort Worth. This fall, Dr. Sam Spencer is going to be taking the treatment that I have, plus the psychological components to address maybe perfectionism or anxiety or compulsive behavior along the way with it. And he's going to be trialing that when this fall, and that'll be a great publication, I think, to show how to do some of these other things other than what I as a behaviorist know how to do. So I think they're going to definitely advance what I've done. There has been some positive work with safe and sound protocol. Safe and Sound Protocol is an autonomic regulation program. I am a Safe and Sound Protocol provider, and when I work with a person who is kind of very jittery, nervous, anxious, then the Safe and Sound Protocol is a good complement. It's not a just straight misophonia treatment program. For young children, just having positive, fun, rambunctious play and little triggers, it would be part of the relaxation and counterconditioning therapy treatment. But I work with children of any age through their parents. And I love setting up young children activities that allow their misophonia to go down. There are also some other things I've heard of that I don't know enough about to comment on. There has been some positive results from neurofeedback, but not generally, it's not reliably successful, let's put it that way. There is also a question here about medication. And medication can help people who have an emotional problem, a psychological problem. So if a person has anxiety or depression, then treatment of that through medication will improve their overall health and well-being. And if their health and well-being comes up, the misophonia severity goes down. There's been a number of cases where people have taken some supplement, and if they take a supplement and it improves their health and well-being, then that will cause the misophonia to go down. So there's lots of little one-of things that people have done for their misophonia. If you're a little bit intolerant to bananas and you stop eating bananas, then that alone can make your misophonia come down. And I think that's about all the major ones that I would talk about it at this time. So, so that was a question on medication and Abilify. Again, it was Prozac and Abilify was the question, and I'm not familiar with Abilify. Prozac is an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And let's see, Abilify is, let's see what class it falls under. It's an antipsychotic. So I know nothing about using Abilify for misophonia. Oh, but there is one medication that has been shown with some good level of effectiveness for people who have a very strong physiological response after a trigger. Now, that strong physiological response after a trigger comes from the hormones that are released that triggers the fight or flight, the cortisol and stress hormones. And a beta blocker is what it's called. A beta blocker will reduce that release of the stress hormones. Beta blockers are used for high blood pressure and for presentation anxiety, stage fright. So for those people who have that, it doesn't stop the trigger and the emotions, but then it decreases the after effects. So that, and propranolol is the one that I know that's been used the most. Propranolol, and it's an older medication. You don't have to ramp it up. You can try it for a few days. If it makes a difference, it makes a difference. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's propranolol, a beta blocker. Okay, let's see. I have a comment or a question here. A family member has severe misophonia, and they've labeled this person ASD, autism spectrum disorder. So they want to give medicine. I don't think, again, medicine typically is not beneficial for misophonia. Typically, if there's an underlying condition, then that can help. I get a comment here. It says, for me, medication helped take the edge off of response, but didn't do anything for the root cause like Tom's treatment has done for me. Well, thank you. I didn't know that was at the end. Thank you. So it can help. But there really is treatment for misophonia. If you can, it's just not guaranteed for every person, and it takes time. It takes time to change these inherent reflexes that you have. Okay. Another comment right now or question? So I'll tell a couple of stories. Extreme stories, mild stories. So the Queen of England had misophonia, and for her, the sound of, if you take a glass and you drink it half, 2/3 of the way, liquid gone, and you turn the glass up, the ice will clink in the glass. And so you can imagine the Queen's, sitting there even as a little girl or whatever, and you're supposed to have all these manners, and you get this clink and clink. And so that clink triggered her. So her husband had a machine made that made spherical ice cubes. And with a spherical ice cube, they won't stack up and clink. They will slide around the glass. And so that's how she handled her misophonia trigger of clinking of ice in the glass. Peyton Manning, football quarterback, right? Peyton and Eli Manning, famous American football quarterbacks, retired. Peyton has misophonia. So it's not a wimpy thing. This is a tough guy thing with misophonia. And there's an NFL YouTube video that says Peyton hates the sound of Eli eating chips or something like that. And they're getting ready to watch a film, and they're both eating chips, and then Peyton finishes, and then Eli's eating, and Peyton's no longer eating. And so it was triggering, and he's complaining about that. There are a couple of cases of people where they have extreme reactions. So in the Denver area, there was a anesthesiologist who went into the recovery room and started silencing the audible alarms. Now that's a no-no when you have an audible alarm is there to tell you there's a problem that you have to fix. So it's a no-no to silence those alarms. And the nurse came over and confronted him, and he grabbed her by the throat and was lifting her up. And then he let her go and retired. So that was a really severe misophonia reaction. And there was a woman on a Southwest airline flight, a 64-year-old woman, sitting beside a 68-year-old man. And the plane was slow taking off, and the guy went to sleep and was kind of intruding on her space and snoring. And she tried to wake him, and he didn't wake. And she took her ballpoint pen and she stabbed him in the arm. And you can look that up online. You can see that at least 3 marks that she stabbed him at least 3 times. And he screamed, and they took the plane back to the gate, took her off the plane, and put her on a later flight. So those are just a little bit of misophonia things. I have a question here from Christine. Says, do you think misophonia should be lumped under ASD? And the answer to that question is absolutely no. Misophonia is definitely not a form or a symptom of of autism. It is a unique, distinct reflex response condition that can exist with autism, anxiety, depression, PTSD, you name it. Misophonia can exist as a unique condition with people who have any other kind of comorbid condition. Okay, Denise, what do you have for us? You have to unmute, Denise. Okay, Denise is
Yeah,
having
can you
trouble.
hear me now?
Oh, good. We can hear you now, Denise. Yes.
I have trouble with a lot of repetitive sounds or seeing repetitive movements. So and I have that along with misophonia. So is my misophonia part of a larger condition where I cannot tolerate repetitive movement or sounds?
So what you're talking about is what we call visual triggers. So misophonia is really not a great name for this condition because it's not about disliking sounds. It's about being triggered by the sounds. I'm sure it'll never be accepted, but I have called it a CARD, C-A-R-D, a conditioned aversive reflex disorder. And it can happen from auditory, visual, odors. I've heard of one case where this man is extremely distressed by misophonia, but he only has one trigger, and it's the smell of orange peel. And whatever his situation is, maybe he has a family member, a wife or something who just has to eat oranges and peel oranges. And so whatever it is, the orange peel smell is his trigger. So misophonia can be triggered through any sense modality. There are people who have a vibration trigger. And so we don't want to have a different name for all of these things, which basically is an intense negative emotional response to a common stimulus. Okay, so if you're, that's a fine. So Denise, your visual triggers you work with, I work with visual triggers similar to auditory triggers, but visual triggers are often harder to manage. With auditory triggers, you can put extra sound in your ears. You can wear noise canceling headphones. By the way, when you wear noise canceling headphones, you should be playing something into them because seeking silence is not good. It increases your sensitivity to soft sounds. So, but auditory triggers are the easiest to block. You know, the visual triggers are harder. In terms of counter conditioning a visual trigger, if you want to try this, you can take a video of someone doing their triggering activity, their motion. Okay, I'm gonna pause and make put it on your, like you're gonna watch it on your computer in just a tiny little screen down at the bottom, and have just a little short clip of it. And so you're going along, things are going well. Just go ahead and look down at that little screen and click play, and then go back to what you're doing. And you want to keep it to be just a little small trigger. And if it's on a scale of like 0 to 10, usually if it's in the 1 to 3 range, you're safe. You see it, you react to it, but it's just like a bump. It just goes away. And as you do that, your brain goes, oh, I'm not supposed to freak out to that sound or that image. And once your once your reaction drops from a 2.5 to a 1.5, then you can make that screen just a little bit bigger, or you can make the clip just a little bit longer. And so you could slowly keep changing your brain through counter-conditioning to that particular visual image. Visual triggers are horrible in the eating world because you can't, if you have a visual eating trigger, then you can't, a child or an adult can't just wear headphones and block everything out because you've got that visual trigger to deal with. So that's a little issue, a comment there on treating visual triggers. I'm looking like I've got
Thank you.
another message. You're welcome, Denise. Do we have another question or comment? Well, it looks like we have come up on 10 o'clock. And without, let me just put a plug in here for Misophonia Institute. I founded Misophonia Institute in 2016 as a way of trying to get this understanding of misophonia out to the world. And we're now funding this research that's being done at the University of North Texas with Dr. Sam Spencer. And so Misophonia Institute, you can go to misophonia.org. Let's see if I actually have a something here that I can show that has our website there, misophonia.org. And donate if you so desire to help this. We have written a check for $32,000 so far to the University of North Texas. That's quite depleted our reserve, but we've had about $16,000 worth of donations. The problem with misophonia research is that what people are researching is this model A. They're researching the question, why do these common sounds trigger these intense negative emotions? And that's not the real problem. The real problem is that triggers a physical response, and the physical response triggers the extreme negative emotions. And so Misophonia Institute is trying to make this known so that the treatments that develop, the things we're looking at for misophonia, can be found, understood, and be more effective. Okay, so I have a hand up. Andrea.
Hi, I was just wondering when you were talking about different treatments, how can one decide or determine which treatment they should pursue?
Well, if I don't have a great answer to that, other than what suits your view. Would you like to try to peel away the onion with the fight or flight and the judgment and the frustration, or would you like to try to work on that core reflex?
Oh, sorry.
So go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I just didn't know if any treatments have been more successful than others.
Well, at this level, we do not have published data on treatments. So, and another problem is that when you provide treatment for misophonia, you can bring down that reaction, but experiencing a trigger in the normal world causes the reactions to go up. So just because one treatment brings down misophonia severity on average 30% and another one brings down misophonia 50%, doesn't tell you how those people are going to do in terms of regrowing their misophonia through normal experience. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the treatment I provide because I have seen this strong reaction. In fact, let me share this reaction of my granddaughter. I probably shared this before, but this is going to be her hearing 2 sniffs. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this, I'm going to bring this way down to about 9 or 10% volume here, okay? But 8% volume. And let me share this. So I'm warning you, there's going to be 2 small sniffs occurring here. And now I have to find my way back to Zoom and find the share button and share with sound for video. And so this is my granddaughter sitting on a stool, and I have a recording of a sniff beside, and I'm standing here beside her. And understanding, some people don't have distinct physical reactions, but the vast majority do. In understanding where misophonia is zapping you, then allows you to relax those muscles and bring it down with time. I got a text from a person who I'd worked with who talked about how much over the time the muscle relaxation and relaxing around triggers, how it's drastically reduced their misophonia. So, you know, I think I'm prejudiced. I think my treatment is the best because it tries to go after the core response of misophonia, which is this muscle, which is usually a muscle flinch. It's not always a muscle flinch. There are some people who have a sexual response, and that's really hard to work with. So for that person, it may be better to do the secret repatterning hypnotherapy, which is going after when I feel it, I feel the bump to me, I'm going to stay calm, or using the DBT methods that Jolene Jaffe has developed. So again, I don't have there's not a good way of saying this is the right treatment for a person without meeting with the person and understanding some of their conditions. And if they meet the conditions for my basic treatment, then I think it's very fitting. And if they don't meet the conditions for my counter conditioning methods, then they should try something else. So long answer for I'm not sure. I can't give you an answer fully on that one.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question or comment before we go? Okay, well then I am going to go back and share my my misophonia screen and say thank you very much for attending this session, this time together. I am going to do the same thing next Saturday, and so I'm going to publish this the video for this, and I have taken some notes on when the different questions are, so hopefully we can put timestamps in there as to where the different questions are. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great Saturday. You're very welcome.
Good. See you next week.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.